So I've been playing the new Infantry mode and I gotta say it's pretty fun. It's kinda similar to games like Battlefield and Squad, but it still has that War Thunder feel to it. The infantry moves like a tiny tank and the controls feel heavy, especially when using tanks or drones. Let me know if you tried it and what did you think of it. Anyway, welcome back to the part 5 of the medium tanks tier list, where I rank medium tanks from 6.0 to 6.7. We're really close to 10k, so subscribe if you haven't already and let's get started. The M4T26. This experimental tank feels like the illegal child of a Sherman and a Pershing. It combines a Pershing turret with a Sherman hull, with the larger turret housing a much bigger cannon. The 90mm M3 gun is one of the strongest American cannons at this VR, firing APHE shells that are incredibly deadly against enemy tanks. The Sherman hull, however, was already fragile at 5.0, and at 6.0 the tank is just a shot away from blowing up. And that really holds this tank back, especially if you try to brawl or fight at close range. On the other hand, the Pershing turret is solid with armor capable of shrugging off mini hits, which makes this tank effective at long range engagements. Its excellent gun depression complements the top profile and powerful cannon, allowing you to peek over hills, snipe targets, and reverse safely. And even if the tank gets hit, the exposed turret is strong enough to survive. Overall, this tank is pretty deadly, but the outdated hull really holds it back. D tier. The T20. This American tank is pretty fast and snappy. It's armed with a 76mm cannon, the same one we saw in earlier Shermans, which gives it access to APHE, APCR, and HE rounds. At 6.3, the 76mm APHE is still effective, but when you run into heavily armored targets like the King Tiger or Yak Tiger, your best option is to disable their gun or tracks and go for the sides. And this tank has the speed and agility to do exactly that. It can reach up to 56 km/h, making it excellent for flanking, ambushing, and outmaneuvering heavier targets. The reload is also fast, especially at 6.3, where many tanks start to suffer from longer reload times, allowing you to break down well-armored targets step by step until you eventually take them down. Sometimes more enemies show up mid-engagement, so you gotta reverse quickly and retreat to safety. And even when you get caught off guard, the T20's armor can usually survive a hit or two. It's not thick, but the angling helps a lot, especially when enemies don't aim carefully. Overall, this tank is very solid. It used to sit at 6.0 where it dominated, and while 6.3 is more demanding, it still performs very well as long as you play smart and take advantage of its mobility. S tier. The T25. This American tank may look similar to the T20, but it's very different. It's currently at 6.3, but it used to be at a lower BR and he has been nerfed too. It's armed with a 90mm cannon that fires a devastating APHE shell capable of destroying most tanks you'll face. It also gets APCR for dealing with especially tough German armor that can be a nightmare to face. Along with the bigger gun, the T25 has thicker armor, improving its survivability, though it can still be easily penetrated by most strong cannons at this BR. The heavier gun and armor make the T25 heavier, which has a noticeable impact on mobility. It can reach up to 50 km/h and features a reverse gearbox, allowing it to reverse at impressive speeds. However, the acceleration of this tank is among the worst in the game. It feels slow and sluggish, rarely reaching its top speed, but the reverse speed is noticeably better. Overall, the T25 is a strong brawler, combining excellent firepower with decent armor and just enough mobility to crawl in the battlefield. B tier. The M26 Pershing. This American tank is the standard service version of the G26A3, featuring a powerful cannon, improved armor, and respectable mobility. It shares the same 90mm M3 cannon seen on the G25, which remains very effective at 6.7, firing APHE and APCR that allows it to deal with most enemies at this BR. While the gun stays the same, the armor gets a noticeable upgrade, improving survivability, though it still isn't immune to the strong cannons at this BR. Despite the added armor, the M26 remains nimble for its size. It can reposition quickly, reach flanking or ambush positions, and if you get spotted, the armor can bounce a few hits, while the quick reverse speed is very useful for tactical retreats. Overall, the M26 feels like a true heavy medium tank, and it stands out as one of the strongest tanks at this BR. A tier. The M26 T99. This experimental M26 has 44 rockets mounted on its turret, giving it the ability to critically damage and even overpressure enemy tanks. The rockets are especially useful when reloading or trying to disable enemy tracks or guns. However, this extra firepower comes at a cost. The rocket tracks are prone to exploding when hit, making the tank more vulnerable. A tier. The M26A1 Pershing. This is an M26 variant on the Italian tree that's pretty much the same with the addition of a second APCR round, but other than that it's the same, so A tier as well. The M26A1 Pershing. This M26 variant has the same features, but it gets a much stronger cannon that offers improved penetration. The reroll is a bit longer, but the stronger firepower is worth it. A tier. The Panther A. This is the successor to the Panther D, and it comes with a few changes. It keeps the same 75mm cannon, which is still strong at 6.0 and now features better gunner optics. It fires the usual APHE and an extra APCR shell, though it's pretty much useless and the APHE is pretty great. The armor is mostly unchanged, but the Panther A is slower due to having 50 horsepower less compared to the Panther D. At 6.0, the armor remains decent, but it's much easier to pen, especially the large exposed cupola, the turret cheeks, and the frontal glacis that can still deflect some shots, but it doesn't stand a chance anymore against the stronger cannons of this BR. The reverse speed is still terrible, but the turret rotation is much faster, and it now carries a secondary low caliber MG on top, which is useful for tickling enemy tanks. A tier. The Panther G. This is the next tank in the Panther line, and it comes with several design refinements. The tank is slightly smaller with a narrow hull and a redesigned turret, which works in its favor. The hull sides are slightly thicker and the turret also gets a bit more armor at the front. Additionally, the gun manlet is the most noticeable change. It's still sloped on top, but the bottom end is flat and thicker, making it one of the thickest points on the tank. However, despite these upgrades, the Panther G remains vulnerable and a skilled opponent can always exploit its weak spots. On the plus side, the acceleration is slightly improved thanks to the reduced weight, but the reverse speed remains painfully slow. A tier. The Panther F. This is the last tank in the Panther development line, featuring a brand new turret design and a few upgrades. The hull remains largely the same, but the turret is completely reworked, giving the tank a very unique look. It's much narrower and the gun manlet is entirely different from previous Panthers, making it significantly harder to penetrate unless you aim for the flat turret cheeks. The frontal turret arm is thicker, the sides are also improved, and the slimmer shape helps deflect incoming shots more reliably. On top of that, the cupola is smaller and far less exposed, which makes it much harder to target. The firepower is another area where the Panther F sets itself apart, with a slightly slower turret rotation offset by a noticeably quicker 6 to 7 second reload, along with the addition of a rangefinder and upgraded gunner optics. Overall, this is the best Panther and it deserves that S tier spot. The Ersatz M10. This is a unique Panther that was modified to resemble the American M10. It's based on the Panther G, but the cupola was removed and it has additional spaced armor plates that were added to the turret and the front of the hull. The side panels were also removed to hide the Panther's distinctive look. The mobility and firepower remain mostly unchanged, though the tank lacks smoke grenades and APCR shells, but I wouldn't consider that a loss. A tier. The T-3485 SGP. This is an experimental variant of the regular T-3485, fitted with a vertical gun stabilizer alongside a few upgrades. The cannon itself is the same, but it now fires a stronger APHE shell, and the stabilizer fixes the unstable gun issue, especially when stopping suddenly to fire. The armor remains unchanged, though the addition of smoke grenades improves survivability. While the standard T-3485 is excellent at 5.7, at 6.3 it starts to struggle, especially against heavy German and American tanks. With that being said, the tank keeps its excellent mobility, making it ideal for flanking and ambushing, and despite having access to APCR, the APHE shell remains the go-to option and is often a reliable one-shot when hitting enemy weak spots. A tier. The T-34-100. This upgun T-34 is very strong, thanks to the new 100mm cannon that finally gives it the firepower it needed. It can now pen over 230mm of armor, so heavy tanks are not a problem anymore. The larger gun does increase the reload time, but it's worth it. The main downside is the gun depression, which is even worse than the standard Soviet tanks. The mobility is also slightly reduced compared to the other T-34s, but it's still fast enough to move around the map with ease. A tier. The T-44. This is the direct successor to the T-3485, addressing many of its weaknesses with a completely new design. It features a new hull, stronger armor, and a lower profile. The well-angled glacis plate is very strong and can shrug off most shells at 6.7. The turret is easier to penetrate but is more compact, and if you stay on the move, you'll make it harder for the enemies to target its weak spots. It still has the same 85mm gun found on the T-3485, but it has access to a wider selection of APHE and APCR rounds that provide decent penetration, so it won't have a problem against most tanks at this BR. And thanks to its excellent mobility, the T-44 can flank, brawl, and ambush targets effectively, though flanking is by far the safest and most reliable playstyle because the APHE is not strong enough to pen most tanks frontally and the APCR doesn't work sometimes. On the other hand, the stronger engine and lighter chassis give this tank better acceleration and it can reach higher top speed than its predecessors. Overall, this is a great Soviet tank that is a very strong combination of firepower, armor, and mobility. A tier. The T-44FM. This is the early production version of the T-44 and honestly, it's a bit underwhelming. On paper, the armor is like the late production T-44, but in reality, it's weaker and has several weak spots. The hull features a protruding driver hatch, making it easier for enemies to destroy the tank in a single hit, and the large turret neck further exposes the crew. As a result, the tank is vulnerable if caught in the open, so it's best to stay hidden or rely on its mobility. C tier. The T-44-122. This is another experimental T-44 variant, essentially an upgunned T-44FM with the 122mm cannon. It shares the same hull, but the firepower upgrade gives it a big advantage in one-shot potential, especially against medium and heavy tanks. However, with such a powerful cannon comes a long reload, 23 to 30 seconds long, which makes it difficult to enjoy this tank. D tier. The Centurion Mk. This British tank is one of the first post-war main battle tanks. It's armed with a 17-pounder cannon firing the same AP shells we saw in the previous tanks, but it also gains access to APDS for extra penetration against well-armored targets. Even at 6.0, the AP remains very effective and is usually the better choice, as APDS often requires multiple shots to effectively take down a target. Fortunately, the Centurion has a decent reload speed, so you can quickly fire a follow-up shot to finish a target. Sometimes you damage the target, but they still have an active gunner or driver and you just wait there to see if they can pen your armor. On paper, the armor looks mediocre, but in practice, it's quite survivable. Especially the turret, which is more difficult to penetrate when the tank is moving. The mobility is average at best, but the reverse speed is a major advantage, so you can always retreat quickly or disengage after taking damage, especially when deploying a smoke screen. A tier. There is also the Centurion Mk that is pretty much the same, but it has a thicker turret armor and a stabilizer, but it's slightly slower. A tier. The Charioteer Mk. This fast British tank destroyer is built on the Cromwell chassis and is armed with the powerful 20-pounder cannon. When it comes to raw penetration, it's one of the strongest cannons in mid-tier and can effectively penetrate enemies even higher BRs. The standard IP round offers over 230mm of penetration, while the APDS pushes that to well over 380mm, allowing it to punch through even the thickest armor with ease. However, like most British tanks, you really feel the lack of explosive filler. Despite the excellent penetration, post-spin damage is inconsistent, and APDS is often annoying, sometimes passing straight through a target without dealing any critical damage. I honestly get more assists than kills with British tanks in most games. When it comes to survivability, the Charioteer struggles the most. The armor is extremely thin, making it vulnerable to SPA, artillery, and CAS. Because of this, the Charioteer is best played at range or from flanking positions where it can fire first and remain unseen. The Cromwell chassis gives it excellent forward speed, allowing it to quickly reposition, flank enemies, and relocate after firing. But the reverse speed is still terrible. The tank can feel stuck when reversing, and most of the time, if you don't take out the target first, you're done. Overall, the Charioteer Mk is a classic glass cannon. Devastating firepower and great mobility, but no room for mistakes. B tier. The SG-A1. This tank is Japan's first step toward modern MPTs. It's armed with the Japanese-built version of the American 90mm M3 cannon, the same gun family we saw before on the tanks like the M26 Pershing and the M36 Jackson. And just like its American counterparts, the SG-A1 fires APHE and APCR, but it also gets HFS, which makes dealing with heavily armored targets much easier. On top of that, this tank has top-tier levels of gunner optics, almost 16 times zoom, and that's kinda crazy at 6.7. So fighting at close range and sniping is much more convenient, especially when using HFS, which can pin a target regardless of the distance. And honestly, that's exactly how you wanna play with this tank because the SG-A1 has no significant armor. It's extremely fragile and can be destroyed by almost anything. Even SPAs can take it out from the front, so facing enemies head-on is never a good idea. On the bright side, the tank has great mobility. It's fast, has an excellent reverse speed, and can easily reposition or outmaneuver heavier enemies. However, despite all these great features, the SG-A1 struggles a lot. The gun is unstable and is very wobbly, and while the gun depression looks good on paper, it's limited in practice, which makes it kinda unreliable for peeking over hills or using ridge lines effectively. C tier. The SG-A2. This is an improved version of the SG-A1. It features a modified design while keeping the same firepower aside from losing the 50 cal. Compared to the SCA-1, the tank is slightly taller and bulkier, but the armor is still weak and easy to penetrate. And while the SCA-1 had a lower profile, the SCA-2's added height makes its gun depression slightly more effective. C tier. The SCA-3. This prototype is the final and the most advanced variant in the SCA line. It's armed with a 90mm Type 61C cannon, which is similar to the American M3A1 but offers a higher muzzle velocity, resulting in better penetration. However, only the stock AP shell benefits. APHE remains the same. The gunner optics are slightly nerfed but still provide a decent zoom for 6.7. The major upgrades of the SCA-3 are the rangefinder and the autoloader, which takes a reload from 7 to 9 seconds to a flat 6, giving a clear advantage over its counterparts. Despite the new design, the armor remains mostly the same, though the gun manlet is thick and can survive a hit or two sometimes. Lastly, the SCA-3 gets another upgrade. A stronger engine which improves acceleration, though top speed stays at 45 km per hour. And the reverse speed is noticeably slower and you really feel that in combat. B tier. The Type 61. This is Japan's first post-war main battle tank that was developed from the SCA-4 prototype. It's armed with the same 90mm Type 61C cannon as the SCA-3, though it doesn't have an autoloader. The armor is similar to the SCA-3 as well, but the Type 61 has a large commander cupola and smoke grenades, which can be useful for making a quick retreat when in danger. The mobility is comparable to the SCA-3 with a slightly better acceleration, though the reverse speed doesn't get better. Overall, the Type 61 excels at hold-down positions and careful long-range engagements, but it remains vulnerable to most direct hits, especially to its pop and cupola. C tier. The M51. This is a heavily modernized Sherman, commonly known as the Super Sherman, and it's built entirely around firepower. It's armed with a 105mm cannon firing heat and HE, giving it the ability to penetrate and destroy any tank at its BR. The heat shells offer up to 400mm of penetration, meaning tanks like the Yak Tiger, IS-3 and even IS-4 are no longer impossible to deal with. When it comes to armor, it's pretty useless. The M51 has the M4A1 hull that was already weak at much lower BRs, so anything can destroy this tank without much effort. On top of that, the mobility is also fairly mediocre. It chops at around 38 km per hour and the reverse speed is painfully slow. So if you deploy smoke grenades, the tank is not fast enough to reverse quickly and you'll often be hit again before that can happen. The best way to play with this tank is at long range where it truly shines. The gun depression is not that bad and the shells can work at any range, making it an effective sniper. That said, heat can still be hit or miss at times, occasionally doing little to no damage. And one of the most frustrating drawbacks of the M51 is the lack of the 50 cal. For a tank that relies on chemical rounds, the lack of a 50 cal is a major drawback. The maps in the game are always full of obstacles. Things like trees, walls, or even light fences can block shots, and heat is extremely sensitive to anything it hits. The M51 used to be a 6.0, but despite being moved to 6.3, it remains a very dangerous tank, capable of destroying any target as long as it avoids fighting head-on. B tier. The M51W. This is essentially an upgraded M51. Instead of the M4A1 hull, it uses the M4A3 chassis, though this doesn't bring any real improvements to armor or mobility. The major upgrade comes in form of the 50 cal machine gun, which finally solves one of the biggest issues of the M51. With the heavy machine gun available, clearing trees, walls and even fences is no longer a problem, making the tank far less frustrating to play with. B tier. Alright guys, here's the final tier list. Let me know what you think and thank you so much for the love and support. It's really awesome.